From the Gulf States newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm health equity reporter Drew Hawkins, chopping it up this week. Or maybe I should say, calling the game, because today's show is all about the Super Bowl in New Orleans. We'll hear about some of the steps being taken to help keep people visiting New Orleans for the big game safe in light of the New Year's Day attack on Bourbon Street.
A lot more visible law enforcement and a lot more hardened security perimeters.
And we'll also hear more about how the Super Bowl impacts the culture and the people who live and work in New Orleans. That's all coming up on the Gulf States Gumbo. Super Bowl 59 is being played this weekend between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. More than 100,000 people are expected to come to New Orleans for the big game, including big names like Taylor Swift and President Donald Trump. But looming over the event is the New Year's Day terror attack on Bourbon Street that killed 14 and injured dozens. Our sports and culture reporter Joseph King reports on how officials are vowing to keep people safe with tight security.
The law enforcement presence in New Orleans is intense this week. There's already been more police around Bourbon Street ever since the attack. Now, Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry is using an executive order to add checkpoints.
The Louisiana State Police will develop and publish to the public the specific geographical boundaries of the enhanced security zone around the French Quarter.
This means starting Wednesday in the French Quarter, you can't carry ice coolers. Also, handbags larger than 4 by 6 inches are not allowed. Landry says the public has a part to play.
Public safety is a team sport. Just like football, just like basketball, soccer, it's a team sport.
He is urging people to routinely check social media for public safety updates, and full cooperation with law enforcement is required.
If an officer at the enhanced security checkpoint in the quarter asks to search your bag that you're carrying in excess of the size limitations, you are free to refuse it, but you are not free to enter.
The same limitations will be in place at the Superdome for the game Sunday night. The Super Bowl is a Tier 1 event, which stands for Special Event Assessment Rating by Homeland Security. It means it has federal law enforcement support, says Kathy Lanier, the NFL's chief security officer.
A lot more visible law enforcement presence and a lot more hardened security perimeters.
Meaning armored cars, surveillance drones, agents on rooftops, and hundreds of law enforcement officers. Juliet Kayam is a Homeland Security expert who worked for the Obama administration. She says keeping the game safe will not be as difficult as securing the French Quarter.
It's a little bit, in a weird way, easier than Bourbon Street, which is open by design. A stadium is not open by design, and therefore it's easier to fortify, even though it's a much bigger event.
The next big thing for New Orleans will be Mardi Gras on March 4th, which the governor has already declared another high-security event. For NPR News, I'm Joseph King in New Orleans.
So we just heard about how public officials are working to increase safety for visitors in town for the Super Bowl. But what about the people who actually live and work in New Orleans? What are some of the ways the big game is impacting the Big Easy? To find out more, I got our sports and culture reporter, Joseph King, in the studio with me. Thanks, Joseph.
Hey, I'm happy to be here.
And we're joined now by our economic mobility reporter, Stephan Bisaha. Hey, Stephan.
Thanks for having me.
And before we move past the security stuff, Stephan, you've been talking to people who actually work in the French Quarter. How do they feel about the extra security?
Yeah, I actually just called up Lauren Hayden, who owns a T-shirt company in the French Quarter called Flirty Girl and a bunch of other locations. And she was driving over to her store to drop off some new Taylor Swift swag. And she was saying it was definitely a mixed feeling with all the different security there. Like it gave her a little bit sense of some unease.
I'm walking to my little shop on Charter Street in the French Quarter, and I'm passing people holding rifles to keep me safe to get there. While I'm grateful, it's a little unsettling at the same time.
Yeah, so that kind of mixed signal of, hey, this is safe because we've got to have all these people here. Also, it's a constant reminder of the danger that people were in.
And yeah, I know it is a little weird to talk about tourism in this context, but it's really important here in the city. I mean, New Orleans really depends on tourism. And Stephan, you've mentioned this test that you've come up with. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, this came out as I was reporting on the situation in the city's recovery. As you said, tourism is really important here. And we do know tourism is affected by terrorist attacks in different locations, but it can vary a lot location to location. So there are kind of four main tests I kind of seen people bring up lately. And the first was actually the Sugar Bowl, the test of like, would people immediately flee the city? It was supposed to be New Year's Day. It got delayed 24 hours. So the attendance was kind of like a metric of whether people stayed or not. And it was a mixed signal here, too. I mean, this was the lowest Sugar Bowl attendance in the history of the Sugar Bowl. But, it was still 57,000 people there for an 80,000 person stadium. So, I mean, I don't know, Joseph, you're the sports reporter. To me, that sounds like that's so pretty good. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like considering the conditions, that's still a great number to show up.
Yeah, I mean, considering how many people had to, probably change plans, probably couldn't have stayed if they even wanted to, it was still pretty good.
Yes, okay, Sugar Bowl is test number 1. What's test number 2?
Yeah, the second test would be people that already had their plans in New Orleans to come after the attack. Would they still show up? And so far, that has been still happening. I remember I stopped by this fascinating museum in the French Quarter that told the story of Storyville, this old red light district that used to be right above the French Quarter.
Oh, yeah, Storyville. That's actually where Louis Armstrong first started playing music. It's a really, really historic part of the city and a big part of the history of jazz in the city.
Yeah, and I met Klaus Sadlier there. He owns the museum and said it was made before the start of the 1900s and was named after this councilman, Sidney Story.
He basically passed a law saying prostitution was illegal everywhere in New Orleans with the exception of these two districts. And it became known.
That sounds like legalizing it to me.
Yeah, it was quasi-legal. It was kind of a wink and a nod.
I mean, that's so New Orleans, right? This quasi-legal thing that's still happening, still allowed to happen, really?
Yeah, and he did say that business did drop the weekend of the attack. They had a lot fewer visitors to the museum that day. But the weekend after, they had their second busiest weekend.
So I think the mood is a little bit down, but people are coming.
Again, I also heard from Lauren Hayden and Fleur de Girl. She said the French Quarter before this kind of rush right immediately before the Super Bowl, it was pretty quiet. Things are picking up now that the game's just a few days away. But I haven't been on the ground in a couple of weeks. I mean, Drew, Joseph, what have you been seeing in your city?
Yeah, it makes sense that those big events would be part of this test, right? But, we're in the middle of carnival season as well. Mardi Gras is in a couple of weeks, but since the beginning of January, there have been pretty regular parades. They're all mostly local parades, but, as someone who lives here, I can say I definitely see people getting out and about and still celebrating.
Yeah, I can second that. Going out, seeing people still around, still walking around. I will say the security is very heavy. I went out last night. My bag got checked 3-4 times. I was getting sniffed by dogs everywhere I went. And I had to keep reminding security that I was media.
All right, Stephen, so that's 2 parts of your test, but we still have 2 more to go. So what can we look for next?
Well, number 3 was this idea of conferences. And, things like the Sugar Bowl and the Super Bowl, that gets a lot of the attention. They're these huge events. But, these smaller conferences, they're really kind of the lifeblood of the tourism industry in New Orleans because there's a lot more of them. They might be smaller, but they bring a lot of visitors to the city.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's always, it seems like, some kind of medical conference, some kind of sales conference, something like that every weekend as well.
Yeah, along those lines, I met with Walt Leger, who is the head of New Orleans and Company. And he's about to walk into this event at the time for the National Auto Dealers Association. And this was right before that big snowstorm.
They're bringing 22,000 people to town in the next couple of days for their annual conference. And we've had 6 or 7 large meetings with thousands of people who have come to the community. And what our hotel community is telling me is that they actually have better attendance than they had projected.
And, number 4 is really, that's the long-term test. Will people that haven't made plans yet, that are considering making a trip to New Orleans, will they still do that? That's the one we're going to have to wait a while for, maybe until after Mardi Gras to really get a sense of that.
Right, so we'll see what events people actually book and come to after Mardi Gras, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the city right now. I mean, you've got the Super Bowl, Mardi Gras is underway. Joseph, sports and culture reporter, how are these 2 big cultural events playing out in the city?
Yeah, we know the Super Bowl being back in New Orleans is a big deal. and I got a chance to see the St. Augustine High School Marching Band perform on opening night of the Super Bowl. But St. Aug's Marching 100 is not new to the big stage. Last summer, they performed in France for the 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Man, my parents was ecstatic. They were really excited. They know I don't get to do a lot, but since I became drum major, I've experienced so many different things, and being able to perform for the opening night really opened their eyes, and they were so proud.
Haney said they still have their hopes high to possibly perform again on Sunday night.
Anything is possible, but hopefully, we were looking to perform with Kendrick Lamar. That would be amazing.
I mean, yeah, performing on one of the biggest stages in the world is a huge deal. But of course, New Orleans is sort of a stage too, right? I mean, Mardi Gras is kind of like one of the biggest performances of the year. So how's the Super Bowl impacting the culture of New Orleans?
I talked to Queen Cherise Harrison Nelson. She is part of the Maroon Society. They are a group of Mardi Gras Indians. The tradition of Mardi Gras Indians originated from African Americans of West African and Caribbean descent acting in resistance by wearing elaborate and colorful masks and suits. Queen Cherie says her family began their Mardi Gras tradition in the early 20th century. She also has had her hand with Super Bowl Mardi Gras-related events. She helped lead the championship trophy to the Superdome in a parade on Sunday and will be in another Super Bowl-related parade this weekend. During our conversation, she told me how she crafted suits for these parades.
I have a Superdome patch. So I got the Superdome patch out. I'm like, okay, we could put this on, like, it's going to be in the Super Bowl. I mean, in the Superdome, right? And then that got me to thinking, okay, I got some football patches somewhere. We could take the football patch and add some rhinestones around it and put it on a crown.
It's always really incredible to hear how these culture bearers, these elders that are charged with maintaining the unique culture here, how resourceful they are, how creative they are to come up with these things. I'm also curious about local artists and musicians. What does the Super Bowl mean for them?
Well, I talked to local musician Alfred Banks. He has developed a good following on social media. He will be performing around New Orleans at different events. These events are not necessarily Super Bowl related, though. We had a conversation about, in his words, the juxtaposition of being an artist in the city at this time and the opportunities that come with big corporations like the NFL coming here and wanting to take advantage of that, but not watering down your art.
If we could just get the real New Orleans and allow people to truly be themselves and express themselves in the way they are and not think so much about the audience who's going to consume it and treating it like it's about market share and all these like corporate terms and these corporate ways of thinking. If we could just look at it like, yo, we're in your space, help us curate this thing to be what it should be, and let's not worry about exactly how it's portrayed.
And when it comes to artists staying true to themselves in that regard, the perfect example was a performance I saw by Flatboy Giz. While performing at this big media event earlier this week, he did his song Gentrifier in the City, calling out companies that come into New Orleans and buy up cultural spaces and gentrify New Orleans.
That Hurricane Katrina split up the plan.
I mean, yeah, there he is on stage with this Super Bowl media event, and he's doing a call and response about gentrifying the city, right? I mean, that's using that opportunity to broadcast and amplify your own message,
Yeah, and while I was there, I was looking around wondering if, like, all these people that's from out of town, did they really realize what he was saying, Yeah.
I don't know if they actually absorbed the full message of his song there.
Yeah, they might have just been bobbing their head, but, he's going to perform it again at some point.
All right. Stephen, Joseph, thank you guys so much for joining me and talking about this.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I appreciate being here.
All right, now hold up, Joseph, before you go. We still got to do our Gulf States Gem, right? Our series that shines a light on some of the treasures from our region. And this is a Super Bowl special, so I thought it might be good to talk about some of the players that are connected to the Gulf South who we might see on the field for the big game.
Well, yeah, we got a bunch of gems. From the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously, we got the big names like Jalen Hurts, graduating from the University of Alabama. Also, we have Devontae Smith, who went to the University of Alabama, won a Heisman there. He also has ties to Louisiana, so it's a homecoming for him. We got A.J. Brown for the Philadelphia Eagles, wide receiver, went to Ole Miss, also is from Mississippi. We got Landon Dickerson for the Philadelphia Eagles, was a center at University of Alabama. And we got Eli Ricks, who played at University of Alabama and LSU. And we got Justin Reed out of Kansas City, that's from Prairieville, Louisiana. That's about 30 minutes from New Orleans, right, Drew?
30 minutes, 30, 40, 45, about, yeah.
Okay, so it's a homecoming for him, too.
Yeah, so, I mean, a lot of talent out there on the field for Super Bowl 59, yeah.
Yeah, and with that being said, you can basically say no matter who wins, the Gulf South wins at the end.
Absolutely. And remember, we do want to hear about a place that you consider a gem, whether it's a restaurant, a bookstore, or a natural park, or anything else. Send us your suggestion. Email connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org. This week's Gulf States Gumbo was hosted by me, Drew Hawkins, and produced by Stephan Bisaha. Our head coach this week is Orlando Flores. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations, WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.